Earlier this month, Bloomberg reported the Biden campaign had rolled out a $3.5 trillion economic program promising to invest in clean energy. But as friend of the show David Sirota notes, before the convention Tuesday evening, Team Biden may have signaled a change in plans, citing the deficit that the country has from the Trump tax cuts and coronavirus.
Indeed, Joe Biden's one of his top advisors, top confidants, Ted Kaufman, revealed the pantry would be bare if Biden is elected come November, telling reporters a future Biden administration would be, quote, limited in federal spending. Editor-at-large of Jacobin, David Sirota, has been following the story and joins us now to talk about it. And I just want to read, David, first of all, great to see you as always. And I'm really glad that you highlighted this because basically no one else did. This was in an interview in the Wall Street Journal and didn't get any pickup until you really spotted it. What Ted Kaufman, who is a longtime confidant of Joe Biden, really has his ear. He's the one who we've been assured is really a secret progressive and is going to help push things in this FDR direction. He said directly, when we get in, the pantry is going to be bare. When you see what Trump's done to the deficit, forget about COVID-19, all the deficits that he built with the incredible tax cuts. So we are going to be limited. Tell me about the significance of this.
Well, Joe Biden has put forward a whole program that is about making major investments in the country. You've got him pushing for clean energy investments, him pushing for, all sorts of jobs programs, and he's talked about a public option. He's put forward, I think it was by one count, $3.5 trillion of proposed investments on his campaign platform. And then you have his top aide going out and telling reporters that actually we're not going to have any money to implement and do what we're actually proposing to do, which I should add is just not true. I mean, that's not how these things work. It's a very old school 1980s way of looking at budgeting and looking at economics. I mean, we're in the middle of a crisis right now, a public health crisis, a recession. To cut back and get deficit focused at this particular moment, it would be absolutely devastating. I mean, that's sort of the opposite of what you should be doing in a situation like this. So Ted Kaufman goes out and says this, and then you've got a situation where what Biden's top aide has said is in tension with what Biden is telling voters. Biden is, again, out of the Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden task forces, those policy task forces, a lot of major investments, rightly so, that are proposed. And then you've got this, one of his top aides, again, one of his most longtime aides. I mean, Ted Kaufman succeeded Joe Biden in the U.S. Senate after Joe Biden became vice president. That's how close they were. And he got appointed to serve out Biden's term. Him saying that basically there's going to be a different viewpoint once the campaign is over. And really politically, the problem with that is, on top of the economic issues with it, is that we've been down this road before where Democratic candidates campaign for president promising things and then immediately turn around and say, we're actually not going to even try to do the things that we've told voters we're going to try to do. If you remember back in the 2008 campaign, there was a similar situation with NAFTA where Barack Obama was campaigning saying that, NAFTA needed to be renegotiated. They're going to get tough on trade with a much better and improved NAFTA. And then one of his top economic advisors kind of got caught essentially whispering to the Canadian ambassador, we're not really seriously going to actually try to do that. And the point is that, again, on top of the policy problems with that, there's a political problem where it's exposing this wink and nod. I mean, it suggests to voters, at least those who are paying attention and hear about it, that, there's the way that the Democrats look at politics is basically to say, we say one thing to voters and then we say other things to essentially to Washington. And right. That's a real problem. And what concerns me about it is that the question is, did anybody notice it yesterday, or did our story, did people just forget about it? Did they just not pick it up and our story blew it up? Or was it a situation where this quote was in a major newspaper and the liberal groups, progressive lawmakers, the entire kind of Democratic coalition in Washington that is focused on these issues, or at least that's their job to be focused on these issues, whether that coalition just ignored it and just kept silent because of the election. Now, I guess there's an electoral argument, we only got 75 days till the election, just keep quiet. But the question is, after the election, if Joe Biden wins, is that going to be the kind of deference that the progressive groups in Washington, progressive lawmakers in Congress are going to give a President Biden? Because that's what happened in 2009, and it didn't work out that well for people pushing major progressive initiatives.
Yeah.
That's an important point there, David. And this is, so you highlighted this and actually got Team Biden to respond. Lay out what happened. So Team Biden was like, actually, we're going to be spending. But as I understand it, some of the people involved in the modern monetary theory movement and others were still very upset by what his response was. So can you lay that out?
Yeah, I mean, the response was basically, it was one of these, we're going to have enough money to do what we want to do, and we're going to rescind Donald Trump's tax cuts, but we're also going to be, fiscally prudent. I'm paraphrasing here. So it was a very much like, nothing to see here. There's no tension here. There's no hypocrisy. There's nothing really to explain here. Everybody don't worry. What we're campaigning on is what we're campaigning on and what we're serious about doing. But the point is that I think there's this idea of what's called a gaffe in Washington. Oftentimes a gaffe is somebody spoke the truth and they weren't supposed to speak the truth.
Right.
I believe that Ted Kaufman was exemplifying an ideology inside the Biden campaign and the larger Biden world that really is how they think, and that is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it seems to me, David, that there's been a shift in the rhetoric coming out of the Biden campaign. Early on, after he secured the nomination, we started to hear all this talk about FDR, and we started getting all these messages pushed down the Times, Politico, and to other friendly reporters of like, no, he really gets it, right? He really gets the gravity of the moment. He really gets that this is a moment of potentially like fundamental transformational change. You get the task force is kind of a mixed bag there. But, if you look at this week at the convention, you don't hear that rhetoric really anymore. And you certainly don't see represented in the faces that they decided to elevate. You certainly don't see the fundamental transformation wing of the party represented really whatsoever. Bernie got his time. He got less time, by the way, than a lot of other prominent people. AOC was only there because Bernie asked her to be there. That's the only reason she got a nod. So, I've been saying candidates do not give you more than what they promise when they get into office. So the fact that this DNC was basically devoid of any sort of policy substance, to me, is deeply troubling.
I agree. I mean, I think the counter argument would be is that they're not trying to appeal to you and me. They're trying to appeal to, swing Republican voters. And so what was put out there really wasn't for the base. It was designed not to be for the base. But I go back to the idea that exactly what you said. I mean, it is the Democratic Party convention. It is fundamentally supposed to be an event that rah-rahs the Democratic Party, energizes Democratic voters.
Well, and David, if I could just pause you for a minute. We're talking, Republicans want jobs and housing too. Right. The UBI is like an 80% issue right now. So if that's even too far out on a limb for you, something that, probably at least 2/3 of Americans support, what's going on with that?
I agree. And I think what it sort of says is, we don't think the core Democratic message for the base, what the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, we don't think that appeals to the swing voter, middle America, whatever you call it. That making your convention a platform for in some cases, disgraced Republican icons. There was a string of Republican politicians who were at the Democratic Party's convention. What it suggests is you don't have confidence and you don't believe necessarily in the political salience of the things that you were campaigning on vociferously in the primary. And so then you fast forward to a Biden presidency and you ask yourself the question, is that the attitude they're going to have once they're in office? And that's the big question. And I don't think exactly know, but I think we can suspect that it's going to be a big fight to, I think, get the Biden administration, if they win, to do the absolute minimum of what they campaigned on, what they promised to do during the primary and during the general election.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you pointing this out. The newsletter is TMI, too much information. And look, Biden has decades of history of being on board with the cuts and the grand bargains and the deficit hawkery. And you know Republicans will be pushing them in this direction. So anytime you hear rhetoric like this, it is deeply troubling because it reflects that history that we have seen from Joe Biden.
Yeah.
David Sirota, great reporting. Great to have you as always, sir.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Coming up, Team Rising is back. We're going to talk about who got the most speaking time at the DNC and how the 2020 and the 2016 polls in the run-up to the convention compare. So is Biden, in fact, outperforming Hillary? All that when Rising continues.